There we go. So let's call to order the Finance Committee meeting of May 20th here at 9:05. If there's any public that would like to make comment, we will accept it at this time. Seeing essentially no public, then we will move on to the meeting minutes from our February 25th meeting. Any changes or adjustments or corrections to the meeting minutes? Nope. All right. Can we have a motion to approve those minutes?
Motion to approve minutes.
All right. So Jason has moved. Can we have a second?
Second.
Second by Colleen. All those in favor of approving the minutes do so by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed,
Aye.
same sign. Motion carries. So now we will move to old business. And I believe, is it Ed and Corey?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, from Susquehanna Accounting and Consulting Solutions. We'll talk about financial reporting in terms of how often and what should be in it.
Yeah, and I think, so Ed had, I believe Margaret had sent something out, of additional, can you hear me?
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but it sounds like somebody's having a large group in the background somewhere.
All right. Okay, so we'll keep going. Ed's had sent out, I think Margaret had sent some information out, some additional reports. I know we talked last time about some additional real estate tax reports, collection reports that had been previously done. So Ed had gone ahead and updated those and sent out some revisions this morning. So I'm going to let him go over those reports. And then we've also included the report that was given last month. And then once Ed's through those reports, we can just have a discussion on if that meets, what the commissioners, what this committee are looking for on a regular basis and how frequently. But I'm going to let Ed go over those revenue reports where we stand as of the first quarter, basically.
And so that would be the report that you just sent out at 8:39 this morning is the most up to date.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
What that report will show us is basically a comparison of the revenue of the actual and the budget for the last 3 years, 2020. And so if we're looking at the by function, so the first line is the real estate taxes, what was budgeted, and through March, we had collected almost $5.9 million, which if you compare that to the prior 2 years, we actually exceeded the collection from the prior 2 years of almost $1 million. That's good news for March. The hotel tax, obviously, with the pandemic, obviously is lacking behind, and even compared to last year, it's, of course, the pandemic really didn't hit till March of last year. But we are being hopeful that a lot of the restrictions will be lifted, and obviously a major impact on this would be obviously the Penn State football games. So we're being hopeful that that could move forward with the restrictions and that will occur. The next line is the state and federal grant revenue. Comparing to the prior year, 2 years, we're lagging a little bit behind. I think that will be fine. Some of these grants come in on a quarterly basis, and sometimes they're late, especially children and youth. So I think we'll be okay with the grants, even though we're lagging a little bit behind. The fourth line is the fees and commission and fines. We're fairly close to what we collected last year, but behind from 2019, obviously with some of the offices either closed or on a minimal staff. Obviously, this revenue would be lacking with some of the fees versus the probation, DJ offices, and so forth. The next line is interest. And since obviously interest is at an all-time low as far as what we can generate, we are lagging way behind in that, even though we did drop the budget from the prior year. And then the next line, the reimbursements, the 2.9 million. Obviously, we're lagging behind on that, but that also has to do with the prison. And I did meet with the warden, and he did say that the prison board had, I believe, approved to start take in-house outside county inmates, and was budgeted $2 million. He felt that he could at least hit 1.7 by year end. And then lastly, the miscellaneous revenue looks like we have a windfall, but in the miscellaneous revenue, the CHIRP grant was recorded there. Obviously, we could move that up to grants, but that also is just a pass through, so it really doesn't have any bearing on the county budget. So the rest of the miscellaneous revenue, I believe, will remain consistent, and we should be all right there.
Looks like Colleen's got a question.
Okay,
Actually, a comment on the hotel tax. I just wanted to let folks know that April hotel tax collections exceeded $150,000, which is nice. Way better than last year and even better than April 2019. So definitely seeing some recovery in hotel tax. I just wanted to put that out there.
great. Okay, the next report that,
Another-
Margaret's
I have a
got a
question.
question.
So
okay,
on the miscellaneous posting of the CHIRP money to miscellaneous, is that going to be changed, Jason, to the state and federal grant category? Just so I'm clear on that.
I mean, it can be, I think, just for reporting purposes, that was separated out here so that, because it is grant money, but at the same time, we were really just handing it off to CEDACOG, so it netted out on pretty much automatically. So, I mean, it can go on that line, but I think Ed and Corey were just separating it out for report, for showing it on the.
Right, right. I mean, I that's why our miscellaneous line is so inflated and out of sync, right? Because
Yeah.
I know it's a pass through. I just didn't know if you were going to make an adjustment,
Yeah,
pass it through the grants.
right.
I guess it doesn't matter, but just,
Sure. Yeah, I get what you're saying.
okay, the next report I want to talk about is the real estate tax collected and the general fund. On the top page of the report that I have issued, basically is just reporting all the years and the average that we've collected over the years and the year 2021 as far as what has been collected as of May 13th. Again, if you look at March, we did have a windfall in March, and then April was sort of lagging behind based on the average. Moving down the page, it's just showing the cumulative dollars that are collected in total versus each month. And as far as through March, of course, we were ahead. And then if you look at April, April is fairly close to the average of what we collected over the years. So we're being hopeful. And then the last is just the percentage versus the budget for 2021. And as you can see, in April, it's at 83%. The average is 84%. So basically lagging about 1% behind for the first quarter of the year. Then it did also the same thing with the debt service. Again, we had a windfall in March for the debt service collection of taxes. April was a little bit behind compared to the average. And then moving down as far as the cumulative, again, we are a little bit behind at April with the collection. And looking at the percentage for April, the average is 84%. We're about 5% behind the average for the debt service collection. Does anybody have any questions?
Just on the difference between the debt service and the general fund contribution, or when folks are making their payments, are they just not making the debt service? That's what's happening?
Well, that was my thought. I wasn't quite sure. I guess my question is, are all those taxes all on the same tax slip? Because I agree with you as far as usually they should be the same.
they are, and then we split them internally between the two.
So it'll have to be something.
between the general fund and the debt service, but they come into us as one lump sum payment.
So we're gonna have to follow up on that and take a look at that, because they should basically be the same percentage.
Right. Yeah, okay, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think those are the reports that we had, that have been done in the past, and that's reflective of what's in the system now. So there are some things we'll take a look at, such as the debt service, et cetera. But those are the reports that we would anticipate given on a regular basis, as long as they're meeting, what you guys need. And what I would think from a timing standpoint is we could prepare those on a monthly basis. If there's something that we see on our regular monitoring that comes up that we need to notify of you, earlier, obviously we get you some reports more frequently, but that's really just, I guess, the question to the group, if that, if these reports meet everything that you want to see, the ones that we presented today, as well as the ones last week, that give you the departmental data and detail. If that's sufficient, then we'll just operate on a monthly basis, preparing those, and maybe do a little bit more thorough analysis on a quarterly basis, maybe a more formalized report. But these would be the operating type reports that we'd issue. So I'll open it up for discussion on that.
So everybody pretty happy with the reporting we've been getting here over the last couple of weeks? Yeah, I know I am. Yeah, it's pretty much what I was looking for.
Okay.
Okay, that's what we need to know.
Good. Okay. So now on to 2020 year end, which might be a bigger topic than the two words on the agenda. I think I'll probably hand that over to Jason at this point.
Sure. So I know last meeting, the question was posed as to what our current unassigned fund balance was for year end 2020 and surplus deficit for 2020. Right now, if we were to issue the comprehensive annual financial report today, it would be about 10.1 million for the unassigned fund balance. That will actually increase slightly because there are some journal entries that need to be completed yet. So it will actually come in about 10.3 million. Again, there will be some fluctuation till we get to, till that report's, issued. And then actually with some of those adjustments, then we will have a surplus of just about 2 million for 2020.
So is that 2 million on top of the 10.3?
No, that would be in.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we've got about 2 million. 2020.
So the
Surplus.
question for me, Jason, is the 2 million surplus attributable to the CARES Act funding?
No, this should pretty much be net of CARES funds. Because if it wasn't, we would have, our unassigned would be pretty significant.
Because we know we didn't spend all of our CARES Act money, then we were carrying it forward into 21.
Right. Sorry, yeah. No, that part would be included. I was thinking of just CARES funds in general, but yes. Back to your question, yeah.
So I guess that you could go to the next statement and say that we might not have that 2 million, but for the fact that we have CARES Act money to carry forward. Is that an accurate interpretation or not?
No, the 2 million's really from some adjustments from various departments. So it's not, that 2 million isn't so much the CARES, but that additional amount would be in this total.
So it's an important discussion because I think first there are limits to, well, not limits, but recommendations from GFOA as to how large our unassigned fund balance should be. And also related to the American Rescue Plan, there are several paragraphs in there about rainy day funds. And they don't appear to limit those phrases to just states. It appears to me that the rainy day fund, let me see, interim final rules for American Rescue Plan, that would apply to also counties and municipalities. Ed and Corey, do you guys, have you looked into that at all?
Yeah, for the American Rescue Plan, yeah, it has different rules to follow than the CARES Act. So this CARES money is treated a little bit differently. I think you have discretion for what we're talking about here. The surplus is much more discretion than you do currently under the CARES interpretations, or under the American Rescue Plan interpretations that just came out last week. That prohibits it into rainy day funds. CARES didn't have that same
Yes.
rules.
Which is good. And I'm hoping that we could potentially make some adjustments here during what we call our period 13. Because my assumption is that our unassigned general fund balance as of December 31st is roughly the same thing as our rainy day fund based on the American Rescue Plan definitions.
Not exactly. The rainy day fund would be a fund that would be set up separate from just unrestricted fund balance.
Oh,
But it would be viewed similarly. There's no real provision that allows you to just sit it in fund balance. There's some criteria. The only place that you really have some more discretion is in the revenue loss calculation under American Rescue Plan.
Right.
And there's some limitations as to how you got to spend that. There probably needs to be a little bit more clarity. There's some differing opinions as to what that actually means. But you have to show some expenditures to offset those. You can't just put it in the general fund like we could the CARES Act after you've effectively recycled it through use of, salaries of public health, public safety, like you could have under the CARES Act, if that makes sense.
right,
There's
right.
different regulations now, and how they're viewing those salaries are different than they did under the CARES Act.
Right, and as I remember, county finance and the controller's office have worked together to create a separate fund for the American Rescue Plan dollars when they show up. And I believe Colleen's working on having at least theoretically a separate bank account for those funds as well.
That's done.
Yeah, good. So I think the question revolves around, what would GFOA consider to be their maximum recommendation for our unassigned general fund balance? And maybe we should try to come closer or hit that number because in part that might then reflect back on our rainy day fund balance for the American Rescue Plan, because for the next 3 years, we're not supposed to exceed or put theoretically any additional money into the rainy day fund in 2022, 2023, and 2024. Now, Jason, I believe Travis did some investigation on this a couple months ago.
So Tom used to give us a percentage when we were at this point in the cycle about what that GFOA percentage was, between 8 and 12% or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't remember the exact numbers. That's what we need to find. But he used to say to you, GFOA says it's good money management to have this amount in your, you don't want to go below and you don't want to go above in the unreserved amount. And maybe Jason can pull it off their website. I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was a range, a percentage, and it was guidance. It wasn't.
Yeah, I can sort of speak to that. They don't have a specific percentage, but they generally say it depends on various factors. You might want more or less, but generally speaking, I think your 8 to 12 is reasonable. It's typically not more than 2 months worth of general fund, expenditures. You don't want to necessarily get over that, but up until that point, you're probably okay. From their viewpoint, they don't have a formalized policy or percentages though, that they specifically earmark.
All right, and as I remember, the general fund is actually substantially smaller than the county's $84 million budget because we have so many separate funds. All
Yeah,
right,
and
but it's,
places tend to define some of those numbers a little differently too. So yeah, you should be looking at basically the general fund, not all those separate, restricted funding streams when you're setting that.
all right, so we just need to find out what our at least budgeted 2020 general fund was, and then assume what? Divide by 12 to get our standard average monthly expenditure, because our expenditures generally match the budget, at least that's our goal. And then multiply it by 2, and that's roughly the number we would look at.
Yeah, somewhere, I would say somewhere in that range. Jason, I don't know if you have any other input, but I think that's generally the maximum, unless you have other reasons to set aside money that, that you want to consider a concern, a reserve.
No, yeah, no, I agree with Corey. That's pretty much where you want to be. You don't want too much. You don't want an unassigned fund balance that's too inflated, because we should be investing it then.
All right, yeah, because I did look at what several other states do, and they started talking about it. I remember the term, Jason, Monte Carlo simulations, which are very sophisticated, and I just barely understand it. So this formula sounds pretty straightforward. Jason, would your team calculate that? Would Ed calculate that?
I think we can calculate, but we can work together with Ed and Corey as well and kind of come, I would want to, I think all of us or most of us are sitting through some of the ARP sessions and webinars and classes and thoughts and all that sessions going on. So I really think that's something we need, to wrap our heads around too, and exactly what this guidance is going to be and what it really means.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's separate from the dollar amount itself, but it's going to be important, I think, to really understand that before we start before we get too far down the road on calculating what we're going to do with that, with the unassigned fund balance and where it's going to be.
So it's at least possible, I think Commissioner Dershowitz brought it up the last meeting, it's at least possible that once we run the number, we may find that something in the ballpark of 10.3 million is a bit above the maximum guidance level. And I know at that point, Steve was, yes, Margaret.
Just wanted you to know that Steve has been able to join us, so he's on the call here.
Oh, good. Thanks for joining us, Steve. I was just talking on your behalf. I don't know if you heard that last little bit.
Yeah, I'm going to give you from my experience that there's nothing wrong with having extra money in the bank. I know that GFOA says X, Y, Z, but I think if you're raising taxes every year and you've got lots of money in the bank, I think that becomes a problem. But quite frankly, given the uncertainty that we're looking at in the future, I don't think having some extra money and going beyond their so-called guidance really hurts anything. And it certainly is. It's better to have cash in the bank, especially if there's a crisis at the state level. As you remember a few years, Mark, that it was nice to have that extra padding in there to make sure that we could cover expenses when the state and feds were a little bit delinquent in their payments. So just some thoughts as we move forward. I don't know that this is the end all and all of our worries, have too much money in the bank.
All right. Well, yeah, true. Good problem. So Jason, when do you need some feedback from the Finance Committee in terms of what we want to do with the unassigned fund balance so that you could work on closing the CAFR?
So we are going to be extending the deadline for the report to the end of July. So we'll probably touch back together in the middle of June. Baker Tilly should be, I think it's the end of this month, so in the next week or so, which is the end of May, we'll be actually starting really on our audit. So they were behind on some other things with staff being reassigned because we were behind on some things. So So it'll probably be mid-June where we'll come back to Finance Committee on it. So probably the regularly scheduled June meeting would be fine. I think that's the third week or so around this date, or maybe next week, like the fourth week or whatever. So around that date.
All right, so Jill and Natalie, we have a firm Finance Committee meeting for its regular schedule next month. And one of our major topics will be, and let's see if we can reuse this item. Yeah, we could probably still call it 2020 year end and discussion of unassigned fund balance, something in that ballpark. All right, is there anything else we need to talk about for the 2020 year end?
I did have a question.
Sure.
So Jason, just to clarify, we ended our unassigned fund balance, general fund balance at the end of 2019 was 9.1 million. And you were saying that we're going to have a $2 million surplus for 2020. Is that a $2 million surplus in the general fund? And then we've got some deficits in special revenue and you know, the other categories. So we're going to have less in our and that's why you're getting you're only getting about 1.2 or 1.3 in the general unassigned.
I just remuted myself. Yeah, I believe that's what we're looking at right now. But I just have the totals right now in front of me, and I can pull some additional reports and send those out to everybody as well. You can see the picture. I just didn't have those for today.
No, that's okay. 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 Yeah, I just was curious about, you were saying it's 2 million, but if it was 2 million in the general, or if it's 2 million overall, we would potentially have 11 million in the unassigned general fund.
Right.
Okay. So just, I guess as we go forward, I'd be curious about what that number would, or how that would end up.
Yeah, I can get some of that over and then send it even prior to the next Finance Committee meeting, just so you all can see it.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions on the 2020 year end? All right. Seeing none, we can move on to our discussion item, the process for budget modifications. I believe Margaret sent a updated document out on this. Trying to remember, was that last night, Margaret, around 10:22?
No, this was sent yesterday by Natalie Smith,
Yeah,
right after
okay.
the agenda came out.
At
I had
around
asked
5
that it be,
o'clock. There it is.
yeah, I had asked that it be included with the agenda and it was missed, so it came out separately, but so at the last meeting, there was discussion about what is the protocol for budget revisions and did we have a policy? We were all pretty clear about the practice. I think we've been following the practice, but I was able to unearth a policy approved December 7th of 2000. And it basically outlines the process and approvals for budget revisions and most notably, any change movement of dollars between departments must be approved by the Board of Commissioners in public session, of course. And that is what our practice has been. And this policy does underscore and support that practice. It also does provide for the budget revisions that take place between line items within the budget and who has the approval to make those changes during the course of a fiscal year. You know, it probably could be cleaned up a little bit, and modernized since it is significantly old. But I think that it's guided the practice for over 2 decades now. So we did find it and we are in alignment with it.
So that's very good news. And yeah, I agree with you, Margaret. The policy itself is fairly solid. Just might need a little updating based on what's happened over the last 20 years or so. But it seems to be a solid
Exactly.
policy.
Yep. So I would propose that we could do that and bring it back to you just to see what, might be tweaked in this. But for me, it was reassuring that fundamentally we are operating in accordance with this policy and that no changes are made between departments without Board of Commissioners approval.
Well, that sounds very good. Feedback from the committee. Are you comfortable with Margaret perhaps working with the Controller's Office and Susquehanna for some updates to the budget revision policy? All right, I'm seeing some nodding heads. Okay, so, Margaret, it's not your biggest priority, obviously. But, as there's time between your staff and the controller's staff, chip away at it. What we have seems to be functioning fairly well. All right. Is there anything else for the good of the order? Any other questions? No? Well, it just feels like we're a little ahead of schedule, which is good. Since there's no other discussion items, can we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion adjourned by Jason Moser. We have a second.
Second.
Second from Colleen Kennedy or Margaret. Wasn't sure who got that one